Okay, so we're going to start out with our block lettering. Block lettering, bubble lettering, whatever you want to call it. I'll be using a wooden pencil. Ticonderoga is usually the best and it lasts a lot longer, but any kind of pencil will do. I'm using a ruler and an eraser. I know that pencils have erasers on the bottom, but it's just handier when you're going to be erasing a lot to have one, so you can use either one. Okay, so with the block lettering, these are the steps that I like to do to ensure that the thickness of your letter is consistent all the way through. So the first step that I do is you draw or write out your letter. Okay, you figure out how many lines make up that letter. So break it down into lines. We have one vertical line and one horizontal line. Okay, so if you break it up into lines, then it's not so scary when you try to go back and double it or make it big. Okay, so an L is a very simple letter. So something like an R, right? If you break it down into lines, you have one vertical, one curved, and one diagonal. Okay, so you have 3 lines. Break it up into lines. Okay, so next is I like to think of a road. Okay, a road with the dashes down the side. Okay, so basically what you're wanting to do is you're going to want to double this, but instead of just kind of going through and doing this, right, quickly, you want to make sure that all the sides are the same. It's all equal. So that's where our ruler comes into play, but just by that sense, the dotted line is going to act as your middle. So it's kind of also, if you want to think about it as kind of like a skeleton, right? It's going to be in the middle, okay? And you're going to go off of that and make each side from the middle the exact same, okay? And by that, I wanted to try out some highlighters to help you see a little bit better. Here is our L, right? That's the middle line because you're going to end up erasing that middle line anyway. It's just to help you get it all centered. And then you're going to say, okay, I want my letters to be 1 inch thick. Okay, 1 inch thick. So I'm going to line up this guy in the middle, so 1/2 inch. Okay, I'm going to make a dot on the 1 and a dot on the 0. I can go down farther. And remember, you're dividing it into lines. So isolate your vertical line first. And then once you get that done, isolate the next one and do it piece by piece. And it becomes a lot easier. And visually, it's easier for you to pick out the lines that way. Because once you get going, you're going to be making a lot of lines on your paper, and sometimes they can kind of get confusing. So here's our road, right? Now I'm going to move my paper because it's easier for me to draw this way, and you are more than welcome to do that. It's kind of just the trick of the trade that I use. Okay, I'm lining up my middle line right here. I'm going to make a dash on the 1, a dash on the 0, and that'll be my 1 inch, okay, in the middle. And normally you do it on the ends, but if you have like a long letter or a curvy letter, you could make it even dashed all the way through. It's whatever's easiest for you, but you line it up, okay, and see how I'm crossing over these other lines. That doesn't matter because I'm going to go back and erase, right? So there. So now I just need to close it off, okay? So I'm going to go down, close it off, close it off. And obviously my L is more of a, it needs to be taller, but this is just for kind of viewing purposes. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to erase these lines. I'm going to, I did this one in highlighter, but I would go back and erase it. So now all of that is the same width, okay? Now the L might not seem like a big deal, but this strategy really helps with the more complicated letters. So when we say, let's go back to the R, okay? When we say an R, you know, if you just kind of draw it and then do this, sometimes if you think about the road theory that I mentioned, you're going to be driving okay side by side here, but then when you get to this curve, look, there's not enough room for both cars, right? So you're going to have a big crash here. This isn't the same width, so you kind of went from a 2-lane to a one lane. So what we want to do is make that thickness all the way through. So let me flip over so we have more room. Okay, so here is, let's start off with our R. Okay, I'm going to draw really lightly. And I'm going to have the R that I want, what I want it to look like. And really, once you get this down pat, if you do a cursive or fancy kind of crazy looking letter, it's the same process. So this process helps. It's kind of a basic that you can take along with you with the others. Okay, so with your R, remember, first step, break it down into pieces, okay? Break it down into lines. We have 3 lines that make up an R. We have a vertical up and down. We have a diagonal, okay? And then we have a curved line. So we need to focus solely on the up and down line, okay? I'm gonna take my ruler, okay? And let's stay with our 1 inch, okay? So what I'm going to do is line it up here, make a little dash, okay? And the wider you get, the bigger your letter, the bigger your letter needs to be. But just for this drawing purposes, like right now, I can go ahead and tell you that this R is going to be scrunched in. So your R will need to be a lot taller. Okay, and you'll figure that out once you kind of play around with widths, because you could even go down to 1/2 inch, and so in the middle will just be this right here, you know, so play around with how wide you want to go. Okay, think about it with the computer, you know, where they have Word documents and you have that big B, and you have the I kind of like this, and you have the underline. What we're working on right now is bolding your letters, okay? So line it up in the middle, right here, top and bottom. And remember, if you need to go in the, if your letter's gonna be so big, your ruler won't help you with that, you could even do it in the middle. Basically, you're lining up the middle, and you can go all the way up like this. So here we go with this, okay? Line up your dots here, or your dashes. And remember to draw very, very lightly. I'm drawing a little bit darker just so to make sure you can see it on the video. But the lighter you draw, the better, because you can always add more. But if you do it too dark, sometimes you can't erase it fully, okay? So here's our first line. Let's go to our second line. Let's use this one, the diagonal one. The diagonal one is just like your vertical or horizontal, but it's just side to side. So move your paper, move your ruler, line it up in the middle. Remember, we did 1/2 of an inch. Okay. So I'm gonna line this up in the middle, 1, 0, and then I'm gonna go all the way to the end. Remember, top and bottom, both ends. And I'm not worried about the other lines. So I'm just worried about this line right here. Here's the 0, here's the 1, okay? So now it kind of looks kind of confusing, but remember, isolate that line, okay? Measure or line up your dots or dashes. Dots or dashes here. And there you go. And like I was saying, it's going to be a little scrunched, so we can always kind of bring it down to make it a little bit taller and more spread out here. Okay. Next is our third line. Now, circles, curves, things like that, they are a little trickier, but remember, break it down into your line, right? You're just doing this one right here, okay? And remember, all you're doing is following the middle with your ruler, so you can follow it all the way around. So this is what I meant about if you want to start off with the dashes on each end of that line. So this one would be side by side, okay? However, it's gonna be hard to follow this all the way through. So with circles or with curves like this, I do one on the ends and one in the middle, okay? If you need to keep going, remember, you're just following it all the way through. So let's go ahead and make some other dashes. So it's kind of like a connect the dots kind of thing. Okay, so now, remember, looking at this right now, it's a little confusing, but isolate your line, find the dashes that you made, and you're just connecting them. Now with straight lines, it's a little easier because you can use a ruler. That's why sometimes with the curves, you need to make more dashes and measure it out a little bit more. So here's the outside. Now we're gonna do the inside ring. I think I messed up on this one here. And editing as you go, if you mess up, no big deal. Remember, you're drawing lightly. Actually, I didn't. I didn't. I made my dash the other direction, so that's what looked weird. So you're connecting your dashes. Okay. Let's see here. Let me find where I was. Oh, okay. See, that's what's confusing a little bit. Remember, you have your skeleton line, right? Your middle of the road. But remember, this is now the new edge. So that circle here is just going to end up being like this. Okay. So now you're going to erase all of this except for the outside line. Okay. So I'm going to do it in the highlighter so you can see it a little bit easier. This is your outside line. And now, let me see here. And see how I'm kind of taking a second and looking? I'm not just tracing all the lines or erasing all your lines. Take your time, okay? Okay, so there's your R, okay? And like I said, it's a little scrunched. If you wanted to extend it a little bit farther, you could. And then you would be erasing all of these lines in here. But secretly, we know that if you put a dotted line in the middle, like a road, right? It would be even on all sides. even through your curves, right? So that is the step-by-step process. Okay, so we did a very simple one, an L, and we did a more complicated one, an R with a curve and a diagonal. You can do this method with all of the alphabet. Okay, A, you have 3 lines, 2 diagonals, 1 horizontal. Okay, going all the way through. C, now C, S, O, things like that, those are a little bit more tricky because how many lines are in an O? Technically only 1. But on O's, S's, you know, those kind of things, what I like to do, oops, there we go. What I like to do is break it down, like I cheat a little bit. Technically, yes, there's only 1 line, but I'm gonna break it down in my head. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is kind of break it down here, break it down here, and now I've sectioned it off into 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 lines, okay? So I'm taking it piece by piece. So now it's not so scary because I have a curved line, which I know how to do, a curved line, and then these ones, they might be a little curved, but technically they're vertical, right? So you're gonna do the exact same thing. So here is my middle line, okay, my skeleton line that I'm gonna erase later. Okay, and instead of just going like, here's my O, oh, now it's bubble, right? We're artists, we're gonna make it nice and neat. We're gonna make it equal on all sides, okay? Is that you are gonna line up your, let's do our verticals first, okay? Remember, next step is let's do this one a little smaller. So I'm gonna do a 1/2 inch width. So that means I'm gonna put this one on the 1/4, okay? The middle on the 1/4, 0, 1/2, okay? Remember, you're gonna do the tops and the bottoms of the lines, the beginning and the ends, okay? And then with a curvy one like this, you might not wanna use your ruler. But it depends on what kind of font you're using, right? If you have some of the blockier letters, a ruler would be fine, okay? So here's my ruler, but if I don't use my ruler on those lines, okay, then I would just do it like my curve and kind of curve it along with your line. You want your lines to be parallel. Okay, so see, there's not a lot of difference, so either way, whatever you're comfortable with. Now remember your curves. You don't really need to do top and bottom with these guys because they're already kind of laid out for you. So remember, you're gonna line it up in the middle on the kind of arch of it. Okay, so like that. Remember, if it's a big curve, go ahead and kind of do a couple more down the line here to help you with kind of like your connect the dots, okay? And like I said, you could keep going. It's whatever makes it more comfortable for you. So now here, I'm gonna slowly kind of keep my eye. If it looks a little off, you can fix it. That's why we draw lightly. Okay, and there you go. And then you're gonna do the same thing here. S, I do the same thing. S's are usually kind of the trickiest one, I would say. The S, I would do the exact same way. I would break, because remember, technically that is only 1 line. It's a curvy line, but it's 1 line. So I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna cheat and divide it into more lines. Okay, so now you have a curve, and this one, yes, it's curvy, but it's more of like your diagonal, okay? So once you break it down, do the exact same steps that I did with this guy. Same thing with, especially with your letters that have like a Z. Super easy. You can use your ruler with all of that. H, right? Your letters that have the straight lines all the way through are a lot easier than your curvy ones, okay? But take your time. Don't cheat. You know, I'm going to be looking for if it's all even. And like I just messed up here, don't just write it down, scribble it down, and then try to do it. Even with your skeleton one, even with your middle line, make sure it's nice and neat, right? And then you can double it, right? Double your lines. Okay, and then close off. Now, the difference between bubble and block are basically just if you're going to make it pointy or kind of straight, blocked off, or for bubble, you kind of round them off, okay? And that font is whatever one you want. So for this project, I don't care if you do straight, pointy, or rounded off, okay? So that is my tutorial. Remember your middle line here. Remember, break it down into lines and then double each line. Use your ruler, okay? Remember, put your middle line in whatever halfway mark. If you need an inch, remember your halfway mark is your ½ inch, okay? Keep it all the way through so you can follow that line all the way through, okay? And that is it for the bubble letters.